Thanks, everyone, for coming. We've made some great progress on our CUSP team's medication reconciliation project. MedRec is really complex and it affects every one of our patients, whether they are a new admission or are being discharged on a lot of medications. This project has required us to work with physicians, pharmacists, our nursing colleagues, and the Medication Safety Committee. It was really helpful when the Med Safety meeting suggested that we focus on our high-risk medications first.
I think we should also share our success with some of the other units that need to improve their MedRec process. Just 2 days ago, I was taking a transfer from the surgical unit and I caught an error on an insulin order when we did the handoff.
Great catch, Jeff. The MedRec process the team developed and tested on your floor could be helpful for the other floors in the hospital and help the hospital achieve our patient safety objectives. It would be great to see this process implemented on all floors so that no matter where the patient might be transferred, the same MedRec process would be in place. I'm going to see if I can get it on the agenda for the next hospital-wide Medication Safety Committee meeting. Jeff, would you be willing to go to that meeting and talk about this?
Sure. I really appreciate the opportunity to share the work we've done to improve MedRec on our floor. We're really excited because we've seen a big difference in our adverse drug event rates.
Thanks for joining us. Improving patient care is important to all of us. Our adverse drug event rate has been decreasing slightly over the last 6 months, but harming even one patient is one too many. Now, I don't know if you're all aware of what happened to Mr. Isaacs last week on our surgical unit. When he was admitted to our unit, there was a mistake in his medication orders, and unfortunately, we all missed it. He got the wrong dose of insulin. He became severely hypoglycemic and had to be taken to the step-down unit to be stabilized. A reliable medication reconciliation process may have prevented this adverse drug event.
I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope by discussing our CUSP team's project and what we did to reduce adverse drug events that we can prevent any more harm from happening to our patients. Let me begin by providing a short summary of our project.
Okay, I think we'd all appreciate that.
Okay. Our CUSP team identified a problem with patients on high-risk medications like insulin, anti-coagulants, digoxin, and narcotics when we reviewed our monthly adverse drug event data. Similar to what happened to Mr. Isaacs, we had 2 insulin events related to MedRec within 3 months. The wrong dose of insulin was ordered at the time of admission or during transfer to our floor for both of these patients. They both became hypoglycemic and we had to give them D50. When we reviewed our MedRec process, we realized we didn't have a double check in place for patients on high-risk meds. We also didn't have the pharmacist knowledge and expertise to understand some of these medications. So we pulled our team together and did some process mapping.
Process mapping. It's a tool for outlining processes to help explore factors that may negatively impact the process, right?
It is, and by doing this, it allowed us to see where we had to make some changes and standardize our process around double checks and tap into the pharmacy for help. We came up with some ideas and completed a couple of Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles, and what became clear is that we needed our pharmacist's help to develop a process to fix our existing issues. Tom really helped us with that.
I really appreciated having the chance to work on this with the team. We now have a process that generates an automatic consult to a pharmacist at the time of transfer when a patient's on high-risk medications or has over 10 medications ordered. As a result, we've seen great improvement.
Great improvement? I'd like to hear more about that.
Well, we haven't had an insulin-related event for the past 2 months on the medicine floor. And as a matter of fact, we haven't had any adverse drug events related to high-risk meds. At first, we were a bit worried that we didn't have enough pharmacists to verify all the medication orders, but focusing on the high-risk medications was a great idea, and we really have seen a positive impact.
Wow,
That's awesome.
great.
Now, Jeff, what was the biggest barrier for putting this process in place?
Well, one worry was the time that it would take pharmacists to do this check. We all knew we wouldn't have resources to hire more pharmacists, but Tom helped us see that this doesn't take an excessive amount of time as long as it's flagged in the EHR and resources are prioritized for patients with the highest risks.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it sounds good, but I don't think that's going to work on our surgical unit.
Mary, why do you say that?
The staff is already overburdened without complicating the admission and transfer process by adding pharmacy consults. Do we really have that many medication errors on our floor? We only had 2 in the last 2 months, and the patients were not seriously harmed. I think it's impossible to avoid all medication errors. So as long as no one is seriously harmed, I think we're doing okay.
You know, Mary, I used to feel the same way, but once we started to focus on this and realize that these adverse drug events really can be prevented, it became clear that even 1 or 2 events are too many. And personally, if the patient were my mother, even moderate harm is not okay.
I didn't think about it that way. 1 event is too many. The change will be difficult on my unit, but it'll be worth it.
Change often is difficult, but Jeff just made a very important point. What do the rest of you think?
Well, I know there is some variability in the number of medication errors across different units, but I agree with Jeff. Even 1 adverse drug event is too many, and not only for a patient, but also for us. I once gave a dose of morphine to a patient who had been transferred to our floor, but I didn't know that he'd already gotten a dose only an hour before. That detail had been dropped from the handoff from the PACU, and I ended up having to call the rapid response team, and my patient was transferred to the ICU. I still feel terrible about that.
I'm so sorry, Kay. And you're right, adverse events take a toll on us because we never intend for them to happen. Kay, would you be willing to champion the MedRec project on the surgical floor where you work?
I'd love to, Regina, but I really don't have a lot of experience leading these types of initiatives in my unit. Would someone be able to help me? I'd just like to ensure that my unit does as well with this as the Gen Med unit on 3 South did.
Well, I heard Philip, the pharmacist who helps cover the surgical areas, talking about a webinar that he participated in through ISMP, the Institute for Safe Medication Practices. I bet Philip would be a champion for the surgical unit.
You know, that would be great. I like working with Philip, and so do the other nurses on the surgical unit. Can we set up a time to talk with him?
I'll help arrange it.
Great. This sounds like a good plan to help decrease the adverse drug events throughout the hospital.
Kavita, thanks for coming to meet with me. There was a lot of excitement at our med safety meeting about spreading our MedRec improvement process to your floor.
I heard about that from some of my team members. I'm looking forward to learning more.
Well, we've been brainstorming and thinking of champions who might be willing to take on this project on different units, and your unit came up because it's one of the floors that Philip covers.
He does, and it's been wonderful having Philip on our team. One of the best things about Philip is that he's already familiar with the IT systems that we're going to be rolling out across the hospital in 2 months. So it's a good feeling to know that we're going to be improving our systems, and then we're going to be able to hardwire it once the new IT system is in place.
But before we can hardwire it, we need to make sure this process you're talking about actually works on this floor. One of the things that helped our nurses become receptive is the shadowing opportunity that Philip suggested.
I'd like to hear more about that.
Do you know Laura Lopez? She's one of our most senior nurses, and she shadowed Philip for a day, and it became very clear to her how helpful it is to have the pharmacist double-check the high-risk meds during admissions or transfers. And once she was convinced, that's all it took for the other nurses to get on board.
And I'm glad that our unit buys into this because I know from our last hospital leadership meeting that decreasing adverse drug events is a priority for the whole hospital.
Looks like it's all lining up.
So let's review this. Most of the people on our floor are pretty much engaged. You've given me the talking points that you use to educate your staff. I really appreciate that. We're going to start testing the new process tomorrow.
Really?
Yes. The way that you've explained the process, it addresses my concerns, and I think we should start right away. One of our unit's nurses is actually going to shadow Philip and then use the new process with our patients.
That's great.
We're going to do a small test first like you did because our culture is a little different from yours. But once we're sure that this new process works with Meredith Brown, our senior nurse, we'll begin to share it with other nurses.
And then you can track your progress by looking at the data from your medication errors. Sounds like you've covered the 4 E's. Engage, educate, execute, and evaluate. You've got the engagement of several team members. You understand how to strategically align this project with existing organizational goals. You know that certain environmental factors may influence the success or failure of the attempt to spread this intervention, and you understand how important it is to customize this intervention to fit the interests and needs of your unit.
I have covered the 4 E's, haven't I? Our last CUSP projects were successful because of the 4 E's.
Absolutely. So, Kavita, how's your team doing with the new high-risk medication process?
So far, so good. Meredith tested the process with Philip, and they made a few changes. Meredith doesn't work weekends, so she shared it with Mitch, who works weekends, and sometimes he works nights. We wanted to test it and make sure that the process would work across different shifts and on the weekends. The shifts on our unit are so different. During the evenings, our unit clerk is shared across 2 other units, and during the weekends, we don't have a unit clerk. So alerting the team members between the shifts will ensure that the process we design works across all shifts.
How did you get Mitch to agree to help?
Well, Meredith told Mitch that Philip actually found a dosing error, and she really believes that prevented a patient from getting hurt.
That's pretty powerful.
It was. Sadly, though, there are still some nurses on our floor that will probably resist this. We just don't have a pharmacist available all the time, and the nurses certainly don't need any more delays.
Well, that's why the EHR gets flagged. The pharmacist doesn't need to be right there. He can be standing in the pharmacy and see the alert.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
I still think the medication error data will be powerful for your nurses. For example, do you include the names of the patients who were harmed? And when you look at the medication error data, do you look at what time of day or what day of the week the errors occur?
With Philip's help, we've actually been able to get to that level of detail. So now, as we spread this across our unit, we're going to be tracking the total number of medication errors and break it out into day of week and time of day.
That will allow all the nurses to see the impact of the new process no matter when they work. I can't wait to hear about your progress.
Well, I'll be back in a week and I'll let you know how it goes.
Great. I look forward to it.
All right, thanks.